This is the perfect time to focus in on the exact 4 tips to grow the best Monstera and impress all of your friends. One of the first things I always do is find the backside of the plant so I can stake this properly. I got this more uncommon form of the Monstera Deliciosa, the Monstera Serrana, and once I get it out of the pot, I'll show you exactly what you're looking for. So when I talk about finding the backside of your plant, it is the most important skill that you need to have if you want to grow your Monstera as fast as humanly possible. The main thing staking the backside of your plant does is that when you stake it, it makes it so much easier to keep the plant stable and secure. A stable and secure plant will have much faster and larger growth if it has good lighting. When you're growing a Monstera, it's really important that you're not turning your plant every couple of weeks, because the only thing you're doing is making the leaves act as solar panels. If you turn the plant in one direction, the leaves will always follow the light. So finding the backside of your plant as early as possible will set you up for the best growth. This is the backside of the plant here, and I can tell mostly based on the position of the aerial roots. From here, you see where the aerial roots are coming out of the plant and will head down, hopefully, towards the soil. If I flip the plant around to the front, you can't really see any of the aerial roots coming out of the stem of the plant. But when I turn it around, you'll see the direct insertions of where the aerial roots are coming from the stem. So while it doesn't really matter what type of climbing support I use, whatever I use, I'm going to make sure to put it right here along the backside of the plant. So from what I've seen, this Monstera needs a little bit more brighter and consistent light to get those really cool fenestrations that this specific form is famous for. So if you're not measuring your light, getting a more rare Monstera can actually be kind of a waste of time and money. Now, I will always recommend that everyone use a light meter to actually measure and determine how much light your plants are getting. What many people don't know is that there are a ton of free apps on iPhone and Android that you can download that will give you a light reading. It uses the front-facing camera to actually measure your light and get a reading for you. So once you download the app, you'll take your phone, put it in front of your leaf or your plant like this, and as the sunlight or grow lights is hitting the front-facing camera, it will print out a reading for you. If you want to spend a little bit of money, you can get yourself a light meter device that is a lot more accurate. The one that I use is called Dr. Meter, and the only reason why I like it is because it has this bungee cord with the sensor on one end and the device on the other, and it makes it just a little bit easier for me to film. It works pretty much the same as your phone app would. You place a sensor next to your leaf facing your brightest light source, and then you get your reading. Right now, this one is getting 40-foot candles, and it's pretty far away from my window, but this light is actually mostly coming from my camera lights. With my 40-foot candle reading, I can also switch to lux, but this device does have a multiplier, so right now it's times 10, so really it is 400-ish lux. Plant leaves aren't exactly getting energy from brightness, they're actually getting energy from the photons that light sources emit. Doesn't matter if it's the sun, doesn't matter if it's a full spectrum grow light or a fluorescent light bulb in an office. That's what the leaves are absorbing. So for our purposes, growing indoor plants, a light meter or a light meter app is basically all you need. But if you want to get more technically accurate, you would need a device that measures the photons. You would need a par meter. But before you start looking up par meters, I'll just tell you now, a very inexpensive one is around the $300 to $500 range. You do not need one. So instead of a reading in lux or FC giving you brightness, you're getting a reading in ppfd, which is the number of photons that the plant is receiving. But you can also pretty accurately convert brightness, lux or FC, into ppfd, so you really don't need a par meter unless you're working professionally in the gardening or indoor houseplant industry. Now, the reason why I got a par meter is because I was really curious about what my DLI was. DLI is daily light integral, and it's kind of like a light score for your plants. And your light score is basically counting up all of the light, all of the photons that your plant absorbs throughout the day, and then converting that into a number. Plants that need a lot of sunlight, like a cactus, will need a much higher light score, somewhere in the 80s or 90s, and plants that don't like a lot of sun, like a calathea or maranta, they'll have much lower light scores, somewhere in the mid to low teens. Now, when you're talking about light scores, plants will have a pretty wide range of things that they can survive in. They all have a low number threshold and a high number threshold, and pretty much as long as you're somewhere in that range, you can grow a pretty successful plant. Now, as a minimum, Monsteras should be getting around 100 foot candles for about 12 hours a day, and as a maximum, they can be getting up to 2,500 foot candles for around 12 hours a day. And averaged out, that's basically a light score from 1 to 22. In natural lighting, you're obviously never going to get consistent light throughout the day. It's probably going to look something like this, where it starts off slow in the morning, it hits a peak, and then slowly peters off for the rest of the day. Or if you get some direct sunlight through your window, it could look like this, starting off slowly, hits a huge spike, comes back down, and then again, slowly peters off throughout the course of the day. Light scores from my pretty big floor-to-ceiling southeast facing windows in the summertime can get around 4.5. And if you remember, a Monstera's light score can go from 1 to 22, and although 4.5 may seem a little bit small, keep in mind that I am able to grow Monsteras that look like this and that look like this in those south-facing windows. Now, my aunt who has those big southwest-facing windows, on a sunny day, she can get a light score of around 8. That's pretty crazy, right? Considering it's just a southwest versus southeast. So as someone who grows houseplants indoors, how on earth are you ever going to get closer to that 22 range? Well, you need to supplement with grow lights, but it comes at a cost. Buying multiple extremely high wattage grow lights is basically the only way that you're going to get anywhere close to maxing out some of these light scores. But the cost is not so much monetary. The cost is usually feeling uncomfortable in your own home. For example, I've been working on this small form versus large form Monstera video for what feels like a million years now, and I have this plant in the corner and it looks horrible. I do not enjoy this. My eyes hurt. It takes up too much space, but my light score is 17. And when you compare the internodal space to the small form Monstera by my window, look how much of a huge difference it makes. If you really want to max out how fast this plant can grow, you have to admit something that's a little bit uncomfortable. And the truth is that you care more about the plant hobby than you do living in a comfortable environment. And I'm not exactly sure how healthy that is.
And speaking of uncomfortable, this is currently under my dining room table. I really got to do something about this.
This is about 2 months after that first repot, and you probably noticed that this is already looking a little bit different from your first fenestrations on your typical large or small form Monstera. One thing that me and my friend Jeff from Everything Plants have noticed is that this Monstera is a pretty prolific climber. It puts out leaves extremely quickly, and the internodal space seems to follow that of a small form Monstera, meaning that even in the pretty high light that I'm giving it, it still has pretty big spaces between each new leaf. So for me, that means with this plant in particular, but in general, all Monstera, you really have to get used to cutting your plant as soon as it reaches the top of your climbing pole. Now, I know some of you might feel nervous, especially if you're taking your cutting for the very first time, but there's really no need. All you need is something sharp and cleaned or disinfected with rubbing alcohol. Once you do that, you just basically make your cut. Now, for some reason, if you feel paranoid about your plant rotting, all you need is a garden fungicide spray. And you can basically get that from any garden center for around 10 to 15 bucks, depending on your area. As long as the active ingredient is copper or sulfur and it comes pre-mixed, just spray where you cut. Now, I don't want to overcomplicate this because once you take your cutting, this is what you need to do to prevent it from rotting. That's it. A lot of people are still asking about using cinnamon to disinfect your plant, and I am personally guilty of spreading cinnamon propaganda in the past, but basically all you need to know is this. All of the studies that have been done on cinnamon use cinnamon oil extract from the plant. If you're trying to use cinnamon powder, there's likely two things that you do not know. Number one, do you know if your cinnamon was specifically harvested from a certain species of cinnamon tree in Sri Lanka? And do you know how long ago it was harvested? Because shelf life also degrades the quality of the antifungal properties in cinnamon. So unless you're using cinnamon extract oil or grinding the bark off a tree in Sri Lanka, you're probably better off just getting any kind of antifungal spray. It'll be cheaper, it'll last longer, and honestly, if it's produced locally, it'll be more environmentally friendly. I do have an extremely detailed Monstera water propagation video that I'll leave in the description, but basically, once you take your cutting, disinfect it, just stick it straight into water, and you're fine. And after a couple weeks, the roots have finally grown long enough for me to be ready to repot them into soil. And while it was in water, it actually put out a new leaf with more fenestrations than the previous one. And you might be asking what's going on with this leaf. I'm not completely sure because I've been filming this throughout the winter, so it could be temperature related or it could be fungal, but I'm just treating it with some copper, and as the temperature starts to rise, I'm hoping it goes back to normal because this leaf is perfectly fine. I still have to make sure that I follow all of the rules and routines from my other repot and the information that I just gave you in this video. Got the correct pot size, slightly larger than the root ball. I am going a little bit bigger because I do need to put a climbing stake in, and I'm using this around 3-foot stake to put in with this at the backside of the plant. And just as a reminder, aerial roots running along the backside of the plant. So when you're putting a climbing support into your pot, you want to make sure that it's angled a little bit backwards. If you try to get the stake flush with the angle following the pot, depending on what kind of pot you use, this is way too steep of an angle. So you want to have it somewhat like this. And to make it balanced like this, you need to put the stake in first, fill in a little bit of soil at the bottom, and then there will be a small space in the back of the stake, which you need to put some soil in there first, which will make the plant and the stake more stable. And if you pack the soil in, it will actually balance for you. So I'm lining up the back side of the plant to the stake, sticking it in here, and this section will eventually tie to the pole here once I'm finished filling it in. And from there, all you need to do is just backfill the soil. You'll notice that I am covering a fair bit of the stem of the plant, and you want to try your best to make sure that the stem and the petioles are above the line of the soil. One of the roots that did end up growing pretty high up, I am just going to let that one dry out. Maybe I'll cut it off just to speed up the process, but that's pretty much all you need to do. It's pretty balanced for now, but once I water this, it'll make it a bit heavier, and if I need to make this even more stable, I'll just take a larger terracotta pot and then put it inside, maybe put a heavy rock or some kind of brick on top of the plant just to make sure that it's weighted down. As the plant climbs up, eventually as it gets higher, the larger leaves will come out more in this direction, facing the light, and that'll actually add some counterbalance so that the plant is not tipping backwards. If you do put the stake straight up and down, and the plant's leaves are putting out most of the weight over here, your plant will actually tip forward. So this is why I always have my stake angled slightly backwards by a couple degrees. So with those 4 tips, that's pretty much the only thing that you need to know to grow a great Monstera every single time. If you're looking for a more detailed video on exactly how to water propagate a Monstera step by step, you can check out this video over here. Okay, see you next time.